This is Andi Purewal for Boxing News. I'm joined by promoter Eddie Hearn here in New York. Eddie, how are you? Had a slight delay on your journey over?
Yes, I did, but got here yesterday. Nice little 10k over Central Park this morning. Loads of media today, Barstool Sports, Yahoo, Ariel Hawani, Boxing News, and now we're just here for the workouts. So a lot of work to be done this week, not so much for the fighters that we represent, because I don't have any fighters on this card, but we are in charge of, or we've been handed the great responsibility and honour of working and running the event for Ring Magazine, all the logistics, which obviously is very difficult given what His Excellency and Ring Magazine are doing, which is closing down Times Square for a boxing event. So a different kind of challenge this week. Can't wait to see the card unfold and just sit there really as a fan and be part of another great Ring Magazine event, The Zone, huge weekend, and then we get straight on the plane and then fly to Riyadh to watch Canelo Alvarez. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
You not fancy checking in on anyway in Vegas, obviously with the whole Ahmed Ali of situation?
I mean, difficult, going to Riyadh and then coming back for Vegas, but there'll be news dropping very soon about Inoue and Ahmed Ali, which I'm very excited about.
Just to go back to, you mentioned your involvement with this event and how you've been helping set up. Is it a similar event to what Wembley was? It's obviously a Ring promoted event, but Tottenham.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, Ben Eubank was a fight that we'd kind of already made or agreed to do. It was an event that we could have done with Matchroom Boxer, but went to His Excellency and said, do you like the fight? Do you want to do it? And he then said, yeah, we'd like to make it a Ring Magazine event. And yeah, I would say that collectively we all worked together on that event, did an amazing job. I think I was the lead promoter whose licence was used with the British Boxing Board of Control, so I'll take that. But it was a collective effort, Ring Magazine event, powered by Matchroom Boxer, and everyone worked really hard for what was just one of the most iconic moments in British boxing history and one of the greatest fights I've seen live.
Obviously it was something I was going to touch on, so let's just start on that before we come on to New York. Just your initial reflections on, like I said, an unbelievable night from the start up until the end.
Just kind of still digesting it, if I'm honest. I hate losing, and I've not actually been sad, depressed or anything with the fact that we lost, because when I got in the ring after, I was almost like, I can't believe what I've just seen. Obviously I'm biased towards my guy, and I just thought what Conor did was incredible that night. He never stopped trying to win the fight. He was massively outsized in the fight. You could see that not just in the build-up but in the ring on the night. And a massive credit to Eubank as well, because he dug deep, showed incredible resilience. And they just, sometimes when you get a really big fight, it doesn't always live up to the expectations. And sometimes when you've got like two unified world champions fighting for the undisputed, there's so much at stake, it's a little bit cagey, isn't it? These two just had it. They just had a tear up. And it was just guts, just desire, heart, and people loved that. And it kind of felt like it was a massive shot in the arm for boxing as well, if I'm honest, because see those casuals that tune into those kind of fights, we go every week, right? We love it. But they're like, that was their judgment night for boxing. And if it's shit, they go, oh, I ain't going again, didn't enjoy that. But like, as a promoter, when you see people leaving, people, turning the zone off at night after the fight and just going, that was just one of the best things I've ever seen. Like, that makes me very proud. And yeah, I absolutely loved it. Loved being a part of it. The build-up, Eubank arriving on the night, everything. It was just like WWE without script. It was crazy.
How much bigger did that make the event, seeing you rock up the way that he did?
A lot. I mean, it was only an hour or so before the fight, so it was only so much bigger it can make it. But we certainly saw a significant jump in the pay-per-view around that time, because it just went completely viral. And I knew, I always felt that he'd turn up. I kind of knew 24 hours out that it was very likely. But I expected him actually to come on the ring walk and not that early in the night. And I'm kind of glad he did, because it doesn't matter now because we lost, but I feel like that those first sort of 10 minutes after he come, obviously for Conor's team and everything, it was a bit like, whoa, he's here. And if that would have happened on the ring walk, I think it might have had a bit more of effect. But it was just brilliant for the show, and obviously brilliant for them as a family.
I know at the time you said you felt that maybe Conor had done enough just to nick it. On reflection, do you still feel like that? Do you still feel like he did enough to edge it?
I mean, to be honest, and I've said this in all my interviews, it was one of those fights. I had Conor up after 10 rounds, and I feel like Eubank finished like a train. I mean, his size really started to show in those closing rounds, and he definitely obviously won 11 and 12. And I was like, when I got in the ring, I thought, I think it could be a draw. If you, after that finish, if you say to me, you can't say it's a draw, which way are you going to go? I would probably say, I think they'll give it to you. I think Eubank will nick it by a round or something. I was very surprised it was 116, 112. What sometimes give me the hump is that everyone around ringside had it really close, and for not one judge to at least give it a draw or some kind of split, it doesn't really matter because scorecards are scorecards, but I didn't score it like that. But, you know, I think the finish from Eubank was very impressive. I've got to watch it back. I've had a lot of people that have watched it back, and some have said after, no, I've got Eubank edging it. Some have said, I think Conor won that fight. Alexander Usyk was one of them, which is always nice. But no real complaints, if I'm honest. Like, you know, it's a fight that could have gone either way.
I know post-fight there was not necessarily a reluctance, but you didn't want to just go straight in and commit to a rematch. But since then, I've spoken to Nigel. Nigel said, no, we've got to do a rematch. It's got to be next. What do you think is likely?
Yeah, I mean, look, we've signed a contract for the second fight. Everybody has, with the same terms, same agreement. I just said, in that heat at the moment, that, you know, and I had His Excellency on, we've signed for the rematch. I said, I know, we're doing it, but I just said, like, and this is on behalf of both fighters, like, Eubank's not my problem, but you have to look at what they've been through in that fight, and in the moment, it was like, do we want to put Conor at an unnecessary disadvantage fighting these guys that are like 2 divisions above him? And to be honest, I know there was a lot made of the weights and the reheight. We all got it perfectly, because what you saw was a 50-50 fight, and that was what impressed me the most with Conor. But I said to Conor Benn, I said, what are you feeling after, you know, everything that happened and doing it again? And he said to me, if you think that was a war, wait till you see the rematch. I was like, all right, well, that's that done then, isn't it? So, yeah, I don't know if Eubank will take it. I don't know if he'll, I don't want to say if he'll fight again, but he got out of hospital on Monday. It was a brutal war. He knows Conor's going to be, you know, less inactive this time, stronger at the weight, more confident. But it's a lot of money. So we'll see. But of course, everyone signed for it, and that's what we're contracted to do.
I do have to ask, Eddie, on the junior front, as you mentioned, he got out of hospital on Monday, so let's say like a day and a half or so in hospital. What can you tell me about why he ended up there? He denied, and the teams denied that it was a broken jaw. So
that was what we were told by the media that he broke. I mean, if you look at the pictures after his fight, his jaw looks, it's encaved, if you like. I think both fighters were exhausted. Conor Benn went to hospital as well, because I said to him after the fight, you know, he did his media, and then he's like, you know, he's exhausted, and that's the main thing. And when a fighter feels exhausted, they're dehydrated, you know, they could have headaches, and then these are all the signs that, you know, you need to get them to the hospital. And when I was done with all the media, I said to him, I think you should go to hospital. And he went, no, I'm not going to hospital. I said, mate, just do yourself a favour. Go down there, just get a scan, and then it's done. And he went down, they got a scan, all fine, and left. They were 3 beds away from each other, which was quite amazing, because both dads were in the hospital with them, and both fathers went to the hospital after the first fight together, which is just, I mean, it's uncanny. So yeah, I would think, I mean, both battered, exhausted, like, you know, it was a brutal fight.
I'm going to ask you, Eddie, I know you're going to be a little fed up of talking about Eubank and that weight cut, but how much do you feel like, because of what he had to put himself through to get down to the weight, I mean, obviously that rehydration clause played a factor in the punishment he took on the night, resulting in him ending up going to hospital?
The fight. Do you know what I mean? What about the punishment that Conor Benn took? I mean, Conor Benn got shellacking in 11 and 12. Real, you know, tough night's work physically. You know, you should be asking me, do you think it's right that you should be allowing your fighter to move up 2 divisions to fight a guy that is a stone heavier than him in the ring? But we go back to Eubank, and it's like, the reality is the hydration clause was no problem for him at all. In fact, he was asleep. He was supposed to come to the weigh-in at 8 a.m, on Saturday. He slept in till like 10 or 11, just woke up, put his gear on and weighed in, but like half a pound under. What they did was they messed up the weight on the first go. So really, the criticism is not on the hydration. The criticism is about him making his own championship weight. We never asked him to come down. And by the way, the one thing that, I know I get the blame for everything, we never negotiated the contract for Chris Eubank Jr. We had nothing to do. We didn't tell him to make 160 and 170. That was individually negotiated between Ring Magazine and Seller and Team Eubank. Right? Those same people came to us and said, the terms will be 160 and a £10 hydration. Is that what you want? Are you happy with that? And we said, yes, we are. It's, you know, but it's got this narrative that Eddie Hearn made them boil down to weight. Not at all. They negotiated a contract with Ring Magazine on those terms, and that's the same terms as the rematch. If they weren't happy with that, they shouldn't have agreed to that. So it's bullshit, really. But, you know, like I said, go back to, no one's going, wow, physically that was tough for Conor Benn, 11 and 12. Do you think he should be fighting at that weight? And the answer is no. I don't think he should. But actually, on reflection, the reality is, and I said before, pound for pound, Conor Benn beats Chris Eubank Jr. every day of the week. But moving up 2 divisions and fighting him, it's a 50-50 fight. And that's exactly what we saw. A super competitive fight. Now, what we can't say is just because the fight was at such a exhilarating pace and it was so brutal that all of a sudden someone after the fight is exhausted or goes to the hospital. Like that's what happens in fights like that. So look, the narrative's the narrative and people want to spin how they'll spin it. If they're not happy with it, they shouldn't have agreed it with whoever they negotiated with. Not me. I never had the conversation with them. We got offered our terms, we accepted. They got offered their terms, they accepted. And that's the same for the rematch.
The pay-per-view boys, Eddie, yeah, huge. How big were they?
Not for me to say, but yeah, it was the biggest pay-per-view for a long time. And the rematch will be the biggest UK pay-per-view of all time.
Is a rematch bigger than Fury Joshua?
No. But it's right up there. Do you know what I mean? There will never be anything bigger than Fury Joshua. But the rematch with Benn Eubank is as close as anything could get. It's massive, and like this is just the beginning of the story, I think. You know, like these guys are just made for each other. Maybe they should do 3 or 4. Do you know what I mean? But you know, we have got other plans. But for now, obviously, more than anything, Conor wants to settle the score. He'll be here tomorrow.
Do you know if the numbers were bigger on DAZN or on Sky?
I don't know. But yeah.
Also, just want to get your thoughts on Chef Clarke, his defeat to Vidal Riley. Yeah, what did you make of Chef's performance?
I thought it was a disappointing performance. I'm not going to, you know, like obviously I back Chef, and you know he's got to reflect and come again. For me, Chef Clarke, Vidal Riley's a good fighter. You know, I said it in the presser. He's surprised me. He's very awkward. He's a bit tricky, skillful. Probably wasn't the best style for Chef. That doesn't really matter. You've got to do better. Like for me, you know, my plans with Chev is that he's a world-class cruiserweight, and Vidal Riley, in my opinion, is not. No disrespect, he's got a long way to go. And obviously, Chev lost at European level last time out in a close fight. Now he lost his British title, so it's a very difficult road back. But he's still fairly young into his career, but disappointing, if I'm honest. You know, I expected a better performance, and I expected him to win that fight.
In terms of big stadium fights, Usyk-Dubois 2 was announced. Just get your take on that, and do you think Daniel will get his revenge against Alexander?
I think he's got a good chance. You know, I think he's better placed to do it this time around. You know, I think Dev Sani posted saying, you know, going into the first Usyk fight, these was his last 3. Now going into this Usyk fight, it's Dubois, Hrgovic and Miller. So, yeah, it's a good fight for Daniel. Great opportunity. Could become undisputed at the end of it.
And also, as we mentioned, Fury Joshua, Tyson back in the gym with Sugar Hill. What can you tell me, Eddie?
I honestly can't tell you. Like, there's nothing from our side. We're not in any talks, any negotiations. Look, maybe Fury's messaged AJ. I don't know. I've not heard that. But I just think Fury's the kind of guy that will be watching Benn Eubank and seeing Usyk-Dubois announced, and he's another guy that likes, you know, he likes the attention. He likes to be the man. And there'll be nothing that will make him the man more than fighting Anthony Joshua. So we shall see.
Alexander Usyk has said that he wants his second and his final fight of his career to be either a trilogy against Tyson or AJ. Would you take an Usyk trilogy and a chance for redemption over a Tyson Fury fight?
Probably not, because we've lost 2 of those fights. Doesn't mean I don't think we can't win the third, but for me, the Fury fight is the one. Like, we've just seen, look at Saturday, like, there's nothing like it. But, you know, if Dubois was to win, we could fight Dubois for undisputed. So, yeah, we'll see what happens over the next couple of months.
All that talk about back in the UK and fighters there. Here we are in New York.
Yes.
What are you expecting from the madness on Saturday, Ed?
3 good fights, actually. I think you got 3 of the biggest stars in world boxing and young guys that really are the future of the sport over the next few years. So good to see Ryan Garcia back looking healthy. And I think he should really, like, obviously I know he got banned and all that kind of stuff, but he had his problems. He should really be commended for what he has done to get himself back in position. And I think he's a really important asset to boxing. I think he stops Rowley quite early in the fight. I like Rowley, but I just think Ryan's very heavy-handed and fast. I think Haney Ramirez is interesting. I mean, obviously, that fight with Ryan, it'd just be interesting to see what it took out of him physically and emotionally and mentally. I don't necessarily think Ramirez is the guy to exploit those damages. But, you know, I think it's going to be a competitive fight. I think Devin wins on points. And then Tio Barbosa's really interesting. You know, I think Tio's a bit hot and cold, isn't he, sometimes? But I do expect him to win that fight. But I expect Barbosa. I think Ryan by stoppage and Haney and Lopez on points.
Is there a risk, Eddie? That there's obviously been a talk about Haney Garcia too. You kind of tempting fate a little bit.
Always. It's always difficult when I've said it all. Every time we do a fight where we've got another fight planned, it's a, you know, additional layer of banana skin. So we'll have to see. But I expect both guys to win.
Just last one from me, Eddie. Obviously, we've seen, you know, you've worked with Edgar Berlanga, you've worked with Devin Haney, you're working with Shakur currently, amongst other fighters who may be coming towards, say, the end of their deals, who are stars in the sport. Do you have any concerns in the sense of, like, when their deals are up, they're able to negotiate freely, come to, say, Turkey Al Sheikh, and somewhat effectively cut out matchroom, so then they keep more of their purse, you don't get that percentage, you don't get to negotiate?
But you've got to look at the cost of those fighters in relation to the value of those fighters on your shows. Now, the maths and the balance sheet of a Ring Magazine event and a Riyadh season event is totally different. It's not the real world balance sheet of running a business where you can say it just doesn't work. And Devin Haney is a good example of a purse that doesn't always work. I mean, what he thought he was going to get against Ryan Garcia is actually versus what I told him he would get for fight Ryan Garcia, and he would never have taken the fight if he thought that. On other times, he wants guarantees that we can't deliver. So there's a mix. Like, it's not just, it's a mix of having great talent but running a business. What you can't have is great talent that every time you put them out, you bleed $2, $3, $4 million on a show. You've got no business. Do you know what I mean? So, but at the same time, like, you know, those guys, Devin's getting paid much more for this fight than he could have ever got for this fight with a normal promotion. So, of course, he's doing the right thing. Edgar Berlanga is getting much more money to fight Hamza Shiraz than he could have on a normal promotion. But that will change over time, and I think it's changing a little bit. You know, these guys, they're not going to pay that premium forever as they establish a position in the market. So,
being that little bit of a realisation that maybe the figures aren't what they were in terms of what they're offering.
Yeah, they're not, but they're still a premium. Do you know what I mean? So, some guys want to fight for the premium. Some guys want to own their own show and have their own plan. Do you know what I mean? And of course, everybody's open into fighting on Riyadh season and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But the fighters have got to look at the opportunities, and the reality is most of the time there's more money to fight on these shows than there is on standard shows, and that's what they want. But we have to, you know, sometimes you have to look at a fighter and say they're just too expensive. They're not doing the numbers that the math spits out, and you just can't do shows where you're losing, you know, 7 figures to put those guys out. I've learned over the years, you've got to be really smart and not worry of the ego of losing a fighter and then everyone going, whoa, he's gone elsewhere. Do you know what I mean? Because back in the day, I would pay up to not lose the fighter, and then I'd do another show and think, what are you doing? But now you just go, okay, mate, look, if it's good for you and it's good for us and it works, off you go, shake hands, and it all goes around, comes around. Do you know what I mean? So we have by far the best stable of fighters in America right now, by far. And we're very excited about the future.
Eddie, I appreciate your time as always. Thank you.
Cheers, mate.